Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sunday School. It's 9:30 on October 10th, and it's gray outside, but it's a kind of pleasant gray. And it's good to see you. Good to be with you. We're going to get going in a second, but just give folks a chance to find us. Give folks a chance who aren't watching the clock and hopping on time into the second and all that, a chance to find us. Kirk, what is a word that you would ask people to share in the like a word about something, maybe about their weekend or something? What is a word we can ask people to share by way of introduction this morning?
Wow. Let's make it be August light. Oh, that's two words.
What does that mean?
Autumn light. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, autumn. So so in the comments as you join us, what is your favorite thing about autumn?
There we go.
There we go.
I said August, and I meant to say autumn.
No, August would be nice. Right now it's all about I feel more responsible when I get up in the morning, when I come anywhere, like to church this time of year, because it's so dark, and I'm not someone, as Betty knows, who like really ever beats the sun up out of bed. But I do this time of year. But so I'm kind of counting / dreading the days till what is it, the first weekend of November and the time change? Because then I go back to like I'm confronted with the cold hard facts about my inability to become a morning person by sheer force of will. So thank you for bringing up my painful trauma.
Hey, if I can do anything, I can do that.
Good morning, Terry. Good morning, Karen. Seeing Karen Morrison on there as we're gathering. Friendly reminder to everyone that today is Sandwich Sunday. You can drop off your sandwiches from 2 to 3. I saw Marcia, you were making some sandwiches. Was it yesterday?
Last night.
Last night. Those sandwiches will all go to the Austin Street Shelter. Good morning, Kirk. Thank you for joining us and being here at the same time. You're truly a man of many talents. And for Terry, Karen, Kirk, and others, we'd love for you as we gather just to drop a word about what do you enjoy about fall? All right, so Betty, this is a personal question about Terry, and he's not here. This isn't really fair. What does he do when he can't mow the grass because it all dies?
Well, we've already gone through mourning about the grass, MOURNING, because the good mower it may be terminal. Because we can't find the parts. I mean, he's called people in England trying to find the parts. But he's adapting. It's a process.
For those who don't know Terry, his lawn is immaculate. He's in this endless battle with armadillos who carve out divots in it. It's like it's a putting green. Oh no, we don't talk about armadillos on the show. My apologies. Karen Morrison shares one thing she enjoys about fall is the State Fair of Texas. Mm-hmm. That's a brave thing to bring up after yesterday. We had some folks at the evening service still wearing their Longhorn orange and stuff, and they were doing their best to smile, and I was so proud of them soldiering on. That was heartbreaking.
Well, they undoubtedly needed healing.
That was a good game.
It was, wasn't it?
Even though we couldn't see it because we're Dish Network subscribers, and they've taken ABC off of Dish.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that's another unpleasant thing. It goes along with the mower.
We may have to lay hands on you, Betty. I mean,
So we're going to, as folks are gathering, and welcome, we're so glad to have you with us. We're going to start segueing into segue. We're going to start with our prayer, which is each week we start with the same prayer. It's a song by John Bell. Good morning, Jan. It's a song by John Bell, and it's a song about discipleship, which happens to be our theme. So I'm going to disappear all our little faces, and we will share that song as our opening prayer together. And now, before we bring back our panelists and reintroduce them, our book that we're looking at is on, let me hide this for a second. Our book is on discipleship, and built into that word is the origin, of course, of the word discipline. And so we have a short video to share to kind of spur on our imagination for what that discipline entails. Especially curious to me in this video is the way that Matt Gunter, who's the Bishop of Fond du Lac, presents freedom and discipline not as opposites, like we sometimes might think of them that way, but instead as being on the same team of sort of expressing our full selves fluently with joy and gladness. So we're going to bring that on and share. And for those who are watching, I invite your observations along the way.
Hello, my name is Matt Gunter. I am the Bishop of the Diocese of Fond du Lac, the Episcopal Church in Northeast Wisconsin. And I would like to play the guitar for you. That is, I would like to play the guitar for you. The truth is, I don't know how to play the guitar. I could take lessons and practice and learn chords and all that good stuff, but it seems like an awful lot of trouble and would require some discipline. The truth is, to do anything worthwhile, whether it's the guitar or anything else, requires lessons and training and disciplined practice. It's true for the guitar. It's true if you want to be a fine dancer. It's true if you want to be a fine athlete. It's also true that if we want to be the kinds of people we were created to be, we need to take lessons and practice. Christians believe that we are made to be creatures of glory and splendor, grace and love, mercy and delight. That's what it means to be created in the image of God. We also believe that Jesus of Nazareth was the perfect manifestation of what it means to be God in the flesh, but also the perfect manifestation of what it means to be a human being. We are meant to be creatures of glory and splendor, grace and love, mercy and delight. But the truth is, we often fall far short of that glory and splendor, short of that mercy and delight. Throughout the history of the church, Christians have found that taking on particular practices and disciplines have helped them become better able to perceive God's mercy and delight in themselves and in the world around them, and better able to receive that mercy and delight, and then better able to share that mercy and delight with those around them. Spiritual practices like prayer and worship and fasting have helped Christians focus their attention on God's mercy and delight. Now, the good news is that we believe that because of Jesus, we don't have to earn God's mercy and delight. That is poured out freely towards us and is free for the receiving. It's also true that just by virtue of being human beings created in the image of God, we come already with the gifts and talents to be the kinds of creatures God desires us to be. We also know, though, that because of our own brokenness and blindness, our own willfulness, our own indifference, our own sinfulness, that we do not always either perceive, receive, or give God's mercy and delight. That's why we need to practice and learn. That is why I have encouraged the people of the Diocese of Fond du Lac to adopt a rule of life. Rule of life sounds intimidating, but a rule of life is really just a sort of spiritual exercise program, a series of practices that we adopt to help us focus our attention on what God is doing in our lives and in the world around us, and to help us be more attentive to God and to our lives in light of God. There are lots of things that could potentially go into a rule, but I have selected 5 disciplines that the church throughout history has found to be particularly helpful. The first rule is regular, every Sunday gathering to worship with the people of God in the congregation gathered. The second rule is daily prayer, sinking your heart into the heart of God. The third rule is weekly fasting on Wednesdays, which can mean a variety of things, and we'll talk about that in another video. The fourth rule is keeping Sabbath. And then the fifth rule is a daily examination or review of the last 24 hours and looking at where God has been active in your life and where you have been responsive to God's action and perhaps less than responsive. We'll talk about each of those in future videos, but in the meantime I invite you to experiment and try it on, practicing, adopting a rule of life, like taking lessons or practicing the guitar. Help us become more fully the kinds of people God desires us to be. People of glory and splendor, grace and love, mercy and delight.
May you know God's
God's
mercy and delight. God bless.
God bless.
All right, we're going to bring back our panelists now. Panelists, before we get into chapter 2, and so first I want to introduce you. I don't want to do anything before I introduce you. We have Betty Tunks, Marcia Frederick, Kirk, and Mindy Buchanan. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. Y'all are people, I mean, each of you I can think of as like, it may not be the guitar, but I know you have experience with that dynamic that Bishop Matt was talking about in terms of practices and disciplines that opened up a new kind of freedom. And I'm wondering, one, what you saw in the video that jumped out at you, and two, how have you experienced that journey along that dynamic?
Well, I could immediately relate to the correlation between practicing faith and practicing an instrument. I mean, there's a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes before you ever step onto the stage for a performance. And for a young musician, maybe all of that practice leads to getting all the right notes when they're out there in the concert hall. But then as a more advanced musician, you're more concerned about, there's phrasing, there's fitting into your section. And maybe even as a more advanced professional musician, you want to know where your piece fits into the orchestral score. Mm-hmm. You go from being kind of myopic to looking at the total picture.
Thank you, Betty. Marcia, I don't know what example is in your mind, but I'm thinking of, you've taught language for years, and I think that same dynamic, that freedom equals fluency when I think of languages. And I'm not fluent in the languages yet that I'd like to be, but wondering what you saw there.
I taught classical Latin to young children, 4th through 6th grade. And, if kids make connections, you help them make connections, whatever they're learning, whatever word, whatever grammatical thing, they have the ability to carry it over to the next step. And when you're trying to teach something, I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, that's torture for little kids. How could you teach them Latin?" I said, "Oh, no, they dress up in all the costumes of the gods and goddesses and run around and, all kinds of things, But it's a discipline like Betty was talking about. I mean, you can't go half-heartedly at a language and learn it. You have to really integrate it. And of course, when you can make connections between Latin and English words, that's great too. But, I think, so he was talking about, weekly worship, and I think our own, discipline. And it's the same with the music, with the languages, everything. It is so hard for me to be disciplined about daily devotions, daily prayer, because you jump up and you have all this stuff to do. So and I know that you have to have that for discipleship. You can't wing it, So
that's such a good word. And Marcia, that makes me think of what Rowan was talking about last week in the first chapter. He was talking about expectancy, attentiveness, but he started all of it with this word non-intermittent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
And I've got a friend right now. He's doing a 75-day fitness challenge where he has to get in two 90-minute workouts each day, and they have to be. Sorry, it's either 45 minutes each or 90 minutes. But he has to do them 2 a day for 75 days, and he has to do them 3 hours apart. So you can't just like do one big 3-hour hike and call it your two workouts. And and he posts on Instagram the updates, and I'm amazed and astonished at how like one day's attention has become, I think he's on day 42 now. And I always try to like keep track because I know he's going to post each day. And I'm like, oh, what will it be? It'll probably be 42. And then I'll just see, oh, it's 43 today. Like the progress does add up, like, and so much faster than we think. It's just so hard to balance over against the short term of like, oh, maybe there's a game I want to play, or maybe there's a game I want to watch or something else. But that non-intermittency accumulated over time. Mindy and Kirk, curious what y'all saw too in this, or how you connect to it.
Well, you just reminded me of last week when we were talking about that, and I used to be really good at practicing this, and I'm trying to get back into it, but it's Lectio Divina. Starting my mornings out with that, and I don't have there's 4, you probably know, Father Jonathan, there's 4 parts of it. First, you read your scripture, and it's just a little, it's not like a big, thing. You just pick out a little phrase or whatever out of your scripture. And then you meditate on it. Is that right?
Yep.
Then you pray. And then this last one, I contemplate. Got it. And then, and it doesn't have to take long, but it's just a real, zeroed in on a little piece of scripture and how God is speaking to you that day. And there's just rarely ever a time throughout the rest of the day that doesn't come up again. And that is my goal right now, is to get back into it.
I love that. One of my favorite parts of Lectio Divina is you can start with a scripture and be like, well, this doesn't look promising. And then by the end, I'm like, well, shoot, if God can show up in here, I'm not off the hook for any part of today. Like,
yeah.
What did you see, Kirk?
Well, it's interesting because it took me to my professional career that I started to think about. And for those that don't know, in my professional career, I work with pension and 401k plans for corporations and nonprofit organizations, governments, and things of that nature. But as we're preparing to go kind of deliver our pitch, if you will, my first job is to pull together the team of people that are going to be the appropriate people to work with this, whatever this organization might be, on an ongoing basis, and finding the right people based on what I understand about the culture of the organization and a lot of other things. But then we put together our presentation. So you've got a presentation deck, if you will, you're going to talk through, and everyone has their portion. Someone's going to talk about this thing. Someone else is going to talk about that thing. And we get together over Zoom or WebEx, and we figure out what are the right, slides that we're going to include, and what are we going to exclude, and what are people not going to say, and all of these things. And then we practice. It's almost like getting ready for a play, where we're kind of doing a table read of our script, and here are the things we're going to talk about. And then, as we make changes to that, and then we come back and we practice over WebEx again. That's more of a kind of a rehearsal, and then more of a dress rehearsal. And then it's like, okay, nobody look at notes anymore. Nobody look at any of the slides we've created. Let's just go through this. And then now that we're kind of slowly coming out of COVID, we're doing a few more things in person again. And just this last week, we all got together in San Antonio prior to this presentation and went around, and I said, okay, let's just pretend that all of our technology crashed, and we got out of the car and someone's laptop slipped out from under their arm and it broke into 1,000 pieces, and now we're walking in to deliver this. Let's present it that way. And it was the most beautiful part, because everyone just spoke from their heart. No one had notes, no one had anything taught, but we've practiced it so much that we knew what we were going to talk about, and we knew what each other was going to talk about. So no one was worried. And this was a particular one last week where I called myself Moses here, because I led the whole team up to the point, and then I did not go in for the actual presentation. I stayed back and they went in. And they said about 5 minutes into it, the power went off. And they said, this is great. We know exactly what to do. No problem. And they were not at all, put off or frightened by it. It ended up coming on like a minute or two later. But they called me afterwards and they said that was so perfect that we went through the practice that way because we were ready for whatever came.
Yeah.
And, you can take that and apply it, as Bishop said, in so many areas of your life, whether it's in business or whether it's in art or music or just a daily devotion to being a better person.
And two things that jump out to me in your story, Kirk, are that the practices are not just individual. Like with the teams that you're a part of, certainly as the community of faith together. And the other thing it reminded me of is like John Lewis and the sit-ins back when those happened, the beginning of the peaceful nonviolent protest. They practiced and practiced and practiced because it turns out nonviolence does not come naturally to people who are being abused, and so they would practice having people in their face yelling at stuff, pushing them, hitting them. They practiced and practiced until they could count on themselves to be people of peace. And I love that idea that you practice for every scenario and come to that moment with a confidence that you can be who you pray God is calling you to be in that moment. Mm-hmm. Well, so we talked last week about expectancy and attentiveness. And one way I see it connecting to this idea of discipline and practice, and Bishop Matt mentioned it a couple of times. One of the things we hope to be able to do, because you might say, well, as a disciple, like it's all well and good to Sabbath, fast, pray, all those things, but I'm not going to be able to speak a new language at the end of it. I'm not going to be able to necessarily play music differently. What is it that I can hope to see or hope to get out of those practices? And one of the things he highlighted, which connects very closely to that attentiveness and expectancy, is to see the ability to see God at work in new ways. And that's something that I think is really important to name because I remember last week with the conversation with Dave Mowers, and I said bird watching, and he said, I prefer to call it birding. It's not as passive as that. And I love that because some people could say, like, well, big deal. I'm going to be able to see God at work. I want to be able to do something. Seeing God at work is something. It's a wonderful, wonderful, remarkable something. And for Christians, it's the center of everything. So this week, our short chapter is looking at faith, hope, and love. And we're going to bring up the slides for just a second and then invite y'all have some things that you already have flagged for me that are beautiful to share. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. But the interesting thing, and we were all talking about before class started, how this chapter is a little different from some of the other chapters. Last week, the point was non-intermittent attention to God. Next week is forgiveness. This week was a little more complex and required for some of us going back and re-looking at it. But he's looking at faith, hope, and love as central to this work of discipleship. And he's borrowing some observations from Spanish mystic Saint John of the Cross, and it's a connecting and a tracing. And so John of the Cross connects understanding to faith, memory to hope, and wills and wants to love. So understanding, memory, and wills and wants, John observed, are fundamental to being human. All of those are a part of what it is to be a human being. That doesn't mean we all do it well. It just means that having a memory, understanding, wanting, like those are very human things. And John observed that each of those finds its perfection or its healing in each of these three great virtues of the church. So our understanding isn't perfect, but it can be healed toward faith. Memory, mine isn't perfect, but because I am remembered by the God who loves us and made all things, it can be healed into hope. And my wills and wants are, God knows, are not perfect. I find myself with disordered wants all the time, but it can be healed toward love. So I wanted to it was a little bit of a complicated chapter in terms of how those inner work or play off of each other, but that's the basic layout. Understanding healed becomes faith. Memory healed becomes hope. So we're always moving towards faith, hope, and love. And as Paul would say, the greatest of these is love. So our understanding says, it's imperfect. We don't quite know what knowing is for some days. We don't even know what we can know. And we have questions about whether what we think we know is reliable or true. We can lose confidence in our knowing. And then out of this sense of a brick wall, before our intelligence, the sense of confusion and loss where our understanding is concerned, faith has room to grow. And I love that, because right where I lose my hope and understanding, now I can see like, I'm at the place where faith can actually grow and find a foothold. And he says, you may not understand or have words on the tip of your tongue, but you learn somehow to be confident in a presence, in an other who does not change or go away. You realize that when the signposts and landmarks have all been taken away, there is a presence that does not let you go. And that is faith in a very biblical way. He talks about memories and our sense of memories being so important to our sense of identity and self. What is it to be an American? What is it to be a Christian or Muslim or to be Jewish? And individually, we live in an age where you don't have just one job, maybe, or you have several careers, families spread out across a country, feeling of this crisis of continuity. Where am I from is a question that a lot of people have a hard time answering. Or am I the same person I was? I encountered that crisis this past week, cleaning out the garage and digging through old yearbooks. Am I the same person I was? And it was an interesting question. Rowan offers into that conundrum hope. You have an identity, not because you have invented one, or because you have a little hard core of selfhood that is unchanged, but because you have a witness of who you are. And the image he goes on, what you don't understand or see, the bits of yourself you can't pull together in a single convincing story, are all held in God's single gaze of love. Like a mosaic, like bits of stone, become one piece. And then with our wills and wants, he writes, we lose touch with the notion that the most important freedom is freedom to be ourselves, freedom to grow, not to be ourselves in the sense of asserting what we want moment by moment in that short-term kind of way, but to discover slowly and patiently the deepest rhythms of our life, to find the context in which we will grow as God means us to. And that perfection he calls love, an expression of the freedom to receive. Love, that which drives us to take time, to let go of anxiety. Love, that which permits us to be enriched and to be given to be made alive, to be breathed into, and I love this phrase, a state of openness to joy. I'm going to stop the slides at this point, and I'll be honest, this was a harder chapter to follow, but it was also, with every page, I just felt so much gratitude for these things being worked out and named. It was a very kind of emotional gratitude. But why don't we just kind of go around I was going to say the circle, but I guess go around the boxes. And if something that we just shared resonated, you can name that, or I know we all talked about things that y'all have brought. You want to talk. If you want to share something else in the chapter that jumped out at you, feel free to. And Marcia, would you be willing to start us?
Sure. Well, you referenced this in your slide, but it said you learn somehow to be confident in a presence, an other who does not change or go away. And I think lack of confidence sometimes in really, if I really work at this and believe this, is it really going to make a difference? Do I have the confidence to share with somebody else and disciple somebody else? And I think a lot of times we do hesitate to do to really put ourselves out there, and we just don't lean into that presence that we have. And I also come in sometimes from talking to my neighbor who says she's going to hell and she doesn't care. Seriously, she said, I'll be in good company. And I said, well, I don't care to be there. But, sometimes when we've had these conversations, and she's very, defensive about things, but I thought, am I not leaning into that presence? Am I not letting that presence come out of me and, share? So anyway, that was a part I liked.
I love your observation, Marcia, that part of what the practice and the discipline can do is decrease our hesitancy. So like, because there are plenty of times I have an interaction where I'm like, oh, 2 minutes later, I know. I remember I was in Taizé as a teenager with a group of chaperoning a group of high school students, and someone who had a mental exceptionality at lunchtime with his tray tripped and spilled his food all over the dirt. It was outdoor seating. And I remember my friend Anna falling to her knees instinctively because I was standing there kind of awkwardly, like, I don't know what to do. She dropped to her knees instinctively and started helping him with his food. And I thought, that's what I want to be in the life of faith. I want to remove that hesitancy. I want it to become like reflex in me. And that's the kind of thing that takes that discipline practice. Mindy, what is speaking to you at this moment from this chapter?
A lot. I wrote some things down. I think the very beginning with the faith, and just, it's not a knowing in your head, it's a knowing in your heart that you have that gut faith and in a person and in God, and I think the thing that really spoke to me with that is that everyone's faith journey is different, and we're all on different paths, and that we need to be cognizant of that when we speak to other people. And even when we're thinking about ourselves, I can't compare myself to Father Jonathan. I'm not where you are. I'm still been a Christian a long time, but I'm a baby Episcopalian, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning about my new faith journey. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm starting over in a little bit. And so that we never are right, and we never have it all figured out, because it's an ongoing journey, and that I'm okay in the not knowing of it, that I don't have all the answers, and knowing that I'm never going to have all the answers, and that I have to be okay in that mystery of all of it.
I love your vulnerable sharing there, Mindy, and I'm really struck by your observation. Like, the goal isn't to get it right. When I think of being in relationship with God, I start with what I know from other relationships, and I know in my relationship with Rebecca, the goal can't be to get it right, right? Because that suggests sort of a static place that just isn't true. It's a constant tending to a presence, and when you think of different hard conversations out in the world, contemporary conversations, whether it's the social activism in the world and the discomfort that can sometimes bring to different people and communities, the goal is never to get it right with respect. The goal is to listen, to be present. And that can be, for me, I find that tremendously freeing. I can move to a moment by moment gratitude. I threw away, when I was cleaning out the garage, I threw away all of my old papers from grad school. Why in God's name I still had them after 20 years is a mystery to me. But I thought it can't be about having captured the moment. It has to be being present to this one. And I think what you said really called us to that. Kirk, what jumped out to you?
There's a couple of things at the beginning, that first section, faith and understanding, and then he starts out with, let's begin with understanding or intelligence. And then he carefully says, I'm tempted to say, and then he says it. So I'm tempted to say at the moment that we live in a culture where intelligence is not very much prized. And so I know he put that out there. He was tempted to say it and hesitated to even write it because of you can get on two different schools of thought on how you want to react to that sentence, and that's fine. But he goes on to say later in the chapter, it's an approach that doesn't really seem to prize intelligence in the old sense, where it doesn't give much scope for the mind to be stretched and challenged. Yes. And I think that's kind of to Mindy's point too, is we've got to open ourselves up to the possibility that we don't know everything. I mean, and we have to be ready to have our mind stretched and challenged. And sometimes we need to do that to ourselves. We need to challenge our own thinking. Why do I think this? Is this something I brought with me from some prior experience, and now I'm going to think this way for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Okay. If I am, let's make sure I do it on purpose and not on accident, because a lot of times I think that's where we find ourselves, is going through life feeling or thinking a certain way because we've never challenged ourselves as to why do we think that way.
Amen. And in that, it makes me think of what Rowan said at the end of our slides, love being an openness to receive, which require, it's like this, and we'll talk about this in the sermon, I guess some too, but not having something makes room for someone else to be a gift and to see, to bring something that I can thank God for. Betty, how about you?
Well, I think my thoughts would echo a lot of what's already been said, but when I think about this chapter, the word that remains with me is relation, and he talks so much about dependable or stable relation. And that, to me, when you think about God having a dependable and stable relation with us, that's so freeing. And I think that freedom allows your faith to really grow and stretch, as he said. And it makes it easy. And the way I feel is so different today, being 60 something, than it was, let's say, when I was 30 or 40. And thought I had to have all the answers. I thought I had to perform. I thought everything had to fit in the box. And to have that freeing sense that, no, I don't know everything, and it's fine, because God does. I can put my faith there and not have to rely on humans.
It's such a great point, and that in each of these virtues, the faith, hope, and love, what Rowan is doing is taking us from that understanding, memory, and desire, but he's also taking us from an orientation of seeing those things as about us to seeing those things about God and God's work and God's perspective and God's vision. The other thing that you make me think of, Betty, is how, like, when I was looking back at those old grad papers, or when we look back at previous understandings of God we had, it can be tempting sometimes to feel embarrassment or like, well, thank God I'm not there anymore. And I think part of the relational piece is to say, thank God for all of it, because it was part of a relationship. And like, was I a super awkward first date when Rebecca and I met? You betcha. Do I wish I had been savvier in some respects? Like, absolutely. Is there any part of me that isn't grateful for that first date, awkwardness and all? Not an ounce. So I think that's part of what that move to a relational appreciation does, is it opens up this kind of true gratitude in us, even for those moments where, as you were saying, Marcia, earlier, like those times when we wish we had said something a certain way, like we were learning, it became part of it's all a part of the same journey. It's a part of the moment we're at now, and it's not complete. It's still going.
Well, and I think the people that we are in this moment is because of what we experienced before, whether good or bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, once you have that freedom to be open in relationship with God, then you can appreciate what he puts in your life, whether it be people or ideas or.
Such a good place to end on. I'm so grateful for y'all. I'm so grateful for y'all and for sharing this conversation. You have given me a lot to carry in the week ahead, and I'm looking forward to picking up the conversation next week. We're going to be at chapter 3, and we'll be talking about forgiveness. Take care, friends. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye, everyone.
Yes.
Peace.